Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 927 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today I'm going to be speaking with Carrie. She's the mother of a child with type 1 diabetes who is using Omnipod 5, and we're going to talk all about it. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Are you looking for super comfy sheets, joggers, and towels? Check out CozyEarth.com and use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout to save 35% off your entire order. If you want to take the same green drink that I do every morning, AG1 from Athletic Greens, use my link, athleticgreens.com/juicebox. You will get 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D with your first order. And don't forget, if you're looking for those diabetes pro tip episodes, they begin at episode 210 in your podcast player. If you're having trouble finding them, check out juiceboxpodcast.com or the featured tab in the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. The podcast is sponsored today by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service and is 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. And when you use my link, you'll save 10% on your first month of therapy.
My name is Carrie. I'm the mother of a 6-year-old type 1 boy named Danny.
All right. Danny is 6. How long's he had type 1?
We just had our 1 year on October 23rd.
Diagnosed when he was 5?
He was diagnosed when he was 5.
All right. And what I will do here to try to get around my poor pronunciation is I write down the word carry with a Y, like carry the weight.
As opposed to Carrie Fisher or...
No, yes. As opposed to like I might hit the R too hard and say Kari if I'm not careful. I just listen. My brain doesn't work around words that well. So
it's all good.
This is what I have to do. Are you pressuring me already, Carrie? I don't need this. It's Friday, you know. Okay, so tell me a little bit about Danny's diagnosis. He's a year ago. Do you have any other type 1 in your family? Autoimmune? Was there any reason to think this was going to happen?
Immune stuff on my husband's side, not with my husband.
Carrie, I'm so sorry. There was, I thought there was a pregnant pause, but you were just gone for a second. So can you start over?
Sure. So no diabetes in our family. My husband's side has some non-type 1 autoimmune stuff, Hashimoto's, celiac, lupus, but nothing. I mean, this was not on our radar, like not even a little bit.
All right. So this is your husband's fault. I got that.
All my husband's fault.
Yeah. What else does he do wrong?
Well, we're going to have to do a whole nother hour on that, Scott.
Okay. All right. Well, let's pin the poor guy down now. So this is not something you're not sitting around thinking like, oh, everybody in our family gets type 1. So this is definitely going to happen. So then how do you figure it out?
So we noticed he was peeing a lot. Mm-hmm. And we noticed it mostly at night. We both work full time. He's at school all day. We didn't have a lot of observational touch points during the day, but at night it was just, he was soaking through the bed kind of multiple times a night, but he was otherwise totally normal, fine, healthy. Because it was the end of October, you know, we know people on Facebook and such that have type 1 in their families, and they were raising money for JDRF, which the walk in our area happens at the end of October.
Yeah.
and I had donated, and sort of the social media algorithms were putting diabetes stuff on my phone as I was like scrolling through. And about 5 days after we noticed he was peeing a lot, I texted my husband and I was like, "You don't think he's diabetic or something, do you?"
Because Facebook does.
Right, because I've now diagnosed him.
Right.
And my husband texted back and he's like, "I don't know, is peeing a diabetic thing?" And I was like, "Well, apparently." And it kind of got once we focused on it, we got increasingly more concerned. And the next day I reached out to one of these acquaintances that has a son with type 1 and asked her if she would test his blood sugar.
Oh, wow. That's how you figured it out. So the Facebook algorithm finally did something right.
Correct.
Yeah. It just kept so seriously, like the idea of diabetes just kind of kept being foisted on you by an algorithm. And that really made you think about it?
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
It was late at night. He was in the other room changing Danny's sheets and getting him back to bed for like, what felt like the millionth time that week. And also, I should say, I mean, we have 3 little boys. So there's lots of reasons that, one of my kids could be peeing a lot or peeing a lot at night. I mean, the weather was changing. It was getting colder. You sort of rationalize it 100 different ways.
Yeah. You know how people pee the bed when it's cold out.
Well, little boys do.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a thing.
They just do.
Like when the air conditioning is on, like there's definitely an uptick in our house in like nighttime accidents for sure.
I'm going to say that's because those kids don't want to get out of bed and get cold and go to the bathroom now. And they're just like, it'd be easier. I'll just pee right here. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So we suspected it. Honestly, I thought it was going to be a like finger prick, rule it out.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't seriously think he had diabetes. Our friend tested him on they have a contour. They tested him and they saw the reading as high, which of course I didn't know what that meant. And they just looked at me and they said, "You need to go to the emergency room tonight."
Okay.
And I said, "Well, our doctor's open on Sunday. Let's just wait. I'm sure it's okay. He seems fine." And they were like, no, now, like, leave your other children and go.
Abandon the other kids. Right. That's how serious this is.
Just go.
Did they explain DKA to you?
So she did not explain DKA to me. She said to me, "When you get to the emergency room, tell them you think he's in DKA and you will cut the line."
Okay. And that works. Well, finally. Just the worst way to get in the front of a line you don't want to be in.
Right.
Can I ask for a second? Have you and your friend ever gone back over that moment? Was it hard for them to tell you that?
We haven't talked about it. I mean, at the time, she was, the mother of another kid in the class of one of my other kids. We didn't know each other well. We've become obviously much closer over the years. She's given us, some wonderful advice and things like that. Mm-hmm. But we haven't really talked about it other than just sort of how crazy the world works sometimes, right? That, she had been posting, I donated, we connected, like I thought to call her. It all just sort of, the universe does funny things sometimes. So
it sucks, doesn't it, being an adult? That's all I could think when you were talking about texting with your husband. It's like, none of us are like 20 years old at a concert and thinking like, what'll probably happen one day? I'll probably be texting a man I haven't met yet who will be in the other room of my house telling him how one of our children probably has diabetes. Like, right. It sucks. It really does.
Yeah. Yes. Being an adult sucks. Being an adult with a kid who has type 1 has sucked more than I thought being an adult could be.
Well, I agree. So I'm right there with you. Okay. So you get to the hospital. Do you cut the line?
We went in pretty quickly. My son at that point was absolutely hysterical. I mean, from his perspective, he was basically pulled off a little league field and someone stuck a needle in his finger and now we're at the hospital and he was screaming his head off, screaming at the nurses, "You're not going to take my blood. You're not taking my blood." And the nurse looked at me. She's like, "We're going to take his blood, right?" I was like, "I know, it's okay."
Vampire!
And so they finger pricked him in the ER. and it was like 663 or something like that. And right then we were, moved into the back room and kind of off to the races with the diagnosis.
What position does he play?
He's 6.
Oh, they just shove him out on the field.
Right. They're like right side or left side, close or far.
Do you want to run far this inning, buddy, or do you want to run a little bit? I'll run a little bit.
I think they have like pitcher's helper is the position that everyone wants to be. Because
stand next to the coach.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what kids want to do? They want to be the pitcher's helper?
Well, because that's like the kids can't really hit the ball. So straight up the middle is kind of
the ball goes.
Yeah.
So your kids suck. My kids were great when they were 6. No, I'm just kidding.
What can I tell you?
No, that's exactly what happens too. It's like the one.
It was T-ball. Like there wasn't even any velocity on the pitch to help them.
I understand. No, I'm kidding. No, at that age, that's the only position where you get to field a ball.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty. And then everybody else just stands out there going, "This is it, huh?"
Right. Baseball, really fun, really exciting.
I watched. I don't think I'll ever forget. I don't know the kid, and I have no idea what his name is or where he is now. But around that like 8-year-old time was the time when they would give the young kids one nighttime game at our little league field so that they could come at night and play under the lights and everything. And it brought out. It's the middle of summer, and it brought out these weird moths. I don't know, like they were just big and weird. And one landed in right field, and the kid just walked over to it and he squatted down. I mean, the game is happening. You understand? It's not like in between a batter or anything. He squats down. He's poking at it. He picks it up. He's got it on his hand. He's got it up in his hand. Now he's examining it in his face. And I'm like, I don't think this kid is long for baseball, and sure enough, he was not. He left pretty quickly after that. But I mean, that kind of encapsulates what happens when the ball can't go past the pitcher's mound. Everybody else is just in a coma. So it's fun when they get bigger. Do you think he'll keep playing?
He's pretty all in on soccer.
Oh,
loves soccer. He's good at soccer. I'm not sure he has the attention span for baseball, but we'll see. You never know. Well, he's only 6. I don't have to plan his professional sports career just yet, thankfully.
I am going to, Carrie, give you one great piece of advice.
Okay.
Okay, then we'll move past this. This is for everyone listening. It's the best piece of advice you're ever going to get about sports and kids. Hope that your children are good enough to play and have fun, but not good enough to dream about more. I'm telling you, that's the best advice you're ever going to get. Right there.
I like that.
Yes, because none of your kids are going to end up being 6'6", 240 pounds and stay athletic. Like that's a random thing that happens to a random person. And you can be really good at something and still not fit the mold. And it's a lot of time and effort to put into something. So anyway, that's my best advice. It was given to me by a friend of mine whose son was pitching at a D1 school. And he said, my biggest regret was that he was this good. And he's like, I wish he was just a little less than this. He's like, because he would have played in high school. He would have went to some nice little college. He would have played baseball. He would have graduated. He would have known it was over. And that was it. Instead, here he is, 21 years old, can throw 94 miles an hour and nobody cares.
Right.
Yeah. So, anyway, there's my advice. And it'll bum you all the hell out, but it'll save you a ton of money. If you listen to me right now, get the kid a chess lesson, and I don't know, some home weights. That's it. That's your sport. Go do something else with your time. Plus, I have a permanent farmer's tan, which I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of. And
from being out watching your son play.
Right. Plus, it's the only thing I can imagine. Like, Carrie, somebody asked me recently what I wanted to do in retirement, which was off-putting because I'm 50, but I still, we're trying to financially plan. So I'm like, okay. And all I could think was watch Cole play baseball.
That's awesome.
I couldn't think of anything else. Like, what else do you want to do in your retirement? And I just popped right into my head. I'm like, oh, I want to watch Cole play baseball. And then I was like, and the guy's like, do you want to travel? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, will Cole be there playing baseball when I get there?
Right, stadium to stadium? Is that the kind of travel we're talking about?
Yeah, and I don't want it to be like some sad adult league where, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I want to be playing baseball. Can that happen? The guy's like, I don't know, man. Do you think? I was like, all right. I was like, just save as much money as you can. We'll figure it out later. I'm sure what's going to happen is I'm going to save as much money as I can and then die. And give it to somebody else. That's about how I imagine this is going to go. All right. I'm sorry. Anyway, you are in the hospital. Your kid is yelling at people. How long do you end up staying in the hospital? What do you leave with as far as understanding?
Okay, so he thankfully was not in DKA. We caught it sort of very early, I guess, on the spectrum of how these things go. His A1C wasn't crazy. So we were admitted for a few days, sort of whatever the standard is. One of the first pieces of advice besides tell them you think he's in DK to cut the line that our friend gave us was refuse to leave the hospital without a Dexcom. And I didn't even know what a Dexcom was. I Googled it, watched the little video, and told the nurse practitioner that was assigned to deal with us that I wasn't leaving the hospital without a Dexcom. And she was like, well, I can't, I'm not allowed to show you how to do it. And we really want people to learn the old fashioned way and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I'm not leaving without a Dexcom. So we got the Dexcom in the hospital, thankfully. And the truth is I can't imagine having gone home without it.
How did you make that happen if they were like, we don't do it that way?
I tried to find a hook where I could convince them that they had to do it. And my son goes to a small country day school that doesn't have a school nurse. And so I basically said, I can't send him back to school without the ability to remotely monitor him constantly.
Look at you. Very smart. that worked. They were like, oh, all right. Isn't that so funny?
Kind of. She was like, okay, well, I'll write the script, but I'm not going to show you how to use it. I was like, okay, well, that's even dumber than not writing the script, right? Okay, I'm just going to give it to you. And so I watched some YouTube videos and we put it on him and.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm supposed to say this about any of the products that are advertisers on the show, but this stuff's not that hard to figure out.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, the YouTube video works great. You could call me. I could have explained it to you in 3 minutes. You could have called your friend. They could have.
I hadn't found you yet. I found you shortly after, but you were not yet in my life.
Oh, when does that happen?
I think a week later, a week after we got out of the hospital, I was doing what they sort of tell you to do, which is call their helpline and talk to a different doctor than the one that's been dealing with you, and talk to them about changes and stuff. And they lost me at post-bolusing, to be honest. It didn't take me that long to figure out that takes insulin a little while to work. Mm-hmm. And if you're constantly dosing at the end of meals, you're gonna have a problem. And so I asked them, I said, well, why are we dosing him after the meals? Why aren't we dosing him before he eats? And they're like, oh, well, that comes later. And I was like, okay, you're managing me. So I need to stop talking to you and do some Google searches and try to figure this out on my own. And that's what I did.
Yeah. So you felt what was happening very quickly, that they were spoon feeding you information slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were like, all right, I want to get to the other part now.
Right. Let's fast forward the management, the managing me, and let's talk about how I'm actually going to manage my child.
What was the, what was a post-meal spike looking like?
300s before we started pre-bolusing. I mean, pretty significant. Mm-hmm. I had some concern when we started pre-bolusing. He's 6. What if he doesn't eat all that we think he's going to eat and stuff? But I got pretty comfortable that there wasn't a problem a Juicebox couldn't fix, mm-hmm. And that it was worth it. And so, I mean, we haven't seen, barring pump failures and things like sort of technology happens, we haven't seen numbers like that in a very long time.
Yeah. I sometimes look at the podcast as a whole and I think it's just really a message about common sense around 4 ideas. And I wish there are days I wish I could figure out a way to just say it one time in 20 seconds and make one episode and just leave it up. You know what I mean? And I feel like I try to say it sometimes like that. I'm like, look, here's what it's about. It's about timing and amount. It's about understanding the impacts of the food, that kind of stuff. I know that you need the bigger conversations to understand it and everything, but I mean, when that's the truth, that there are really just these couple of things you have to do to manage a meal, and people are busy telling you to do it opposite of how it works, which leads you, it just I don't know, it starts you down this path of like, it's like destruction. It's like, we're never going to figure this out because you've put me on the wrong path.
Right. And it changes your expectations. I mean, you've talked about expectations in a slightly different context, but if you start to think like, okay, well, I'm seeing a spike to 300 and like the medical team is okay with that, then you start to think that that's actually where your child should be or where you should be aiming to get your child.
Right. And it's not, Carrie, it's not the process that's the problem. Like, I understand the slow start and let's give you some of the information now and some of the information later. Like, all that makes sense to me. The problem is that during that time, someone forgets to explain to you, this isn't how it's always going to be. Right. And here are our expectations moving forward. For now, it's going to look like this, but but blah, blah, blah. Later, we're going to want it to be this way. And it's exactly what you're saying. I remember it as clear as day from an episode, like from the first year when this woman said to me, they gave me a range up to 200 and I kept him here, but then it started to go up and I thought, well, okay, that's fine. It's only 130. And then it was 140. And I thought, well, that's fine. It's only 140. I mean, that's only 40 points higher than 100. And before you knew it, she was at 200 going, well, 200 is only 100 points higher than 150 or 50 points higher than 150. And I was fine at 150. And she just kept talking herself into the numbers being higher, being okay. And I thought, oh, that's how people's minds work. Like, that's how people gain weight. That's how people, do hard drugs. Like, I'll just do a little Coke after work. And then, you know what I mean? Like, it's like that kind of thing. Like
right.
Everyone thinks our brains are, I don't know why, but they're wired like that. And so the process coming out of most hospitals with diabetes is just putting you in a bad situation where eventually you're going to be like, I'm just doing heroin. It's fine. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
that really is, I don't snort it. Like, you know what I mean? like at least I'm not doing this. And then the next thing you know, your kid's blood sugars are 300 after every meal. And you're like, well, this is what it does. It's okay.
Right.
The guy said it was all right. So, all right. I hear you. All right, well, I'm glad it hit you that way. You find the podcast. I'm talking in your ear. You're blah, blah, blah. Now we're going to fast forward you a little bit, like through diabetes stuff to he gets a pump. When you have diabetes and use insulin, low blood sugar can happen when you don't expect it. Gvoke HypoPen is a ready-to-use glucagon option that can treat very low blood sugar in adults and kids with diabetes, ages 2 and above. Find out more. Go to gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used in patients with pheochromocytoma or insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk. Hey guys, just jumping in to remind you that one of our sponsors, BetterHelp, is offering 10% off your first month of therapy when you use my link, betterhelp.com/juicebox. That's betterhelp.com/juicebox. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service. It is 100% online, boasts over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists, and you can talk to them however you want, text, chat, phone, or on video. You can actually message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. Save 10% on your first month. Links to all of the advertisers can be found in the show notes of your podcast player at juiceboxpodcast.com, or just type them into a browser. BetterHelp.com/juicebox, gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. When you use my links, you are supporting the production of the podcast and keeping it free.
He gets a pump. So we switched endos pretty quickly after I found the podcast, and found an endo that was sort of much more, the technology's there. Let's use it. Let's get it in your hands. There's no reason to, quote, do it the old fashioned way for some ridiculous amount of time. We had him on a pump. We started it like right before the holidays in December. So, a month and a half or so after diagnosis.
Okay. And tell me which pump that was. I'm sorry.
So we did the Dash.
Right.
we vacillated, between the wonderful pump options that are out there. And for my son, the tube pumps were just he'd been pretty great about the whole thing, given that his world was pretty shattered too. And his one, red line was that tubing. I'm not doing it.
Okay. Well, so you end up on Dash and you're listening to the podcast. How are things going as far as like, what are your goals and what are you seeing as far as outcomes?
We were doing pretty well. 65, 70% in range being kind of the default. I hadn't yet figured out that wasn't the range that I should be hoping for long term, but it was taking a lot of work. I didn't think our basal was right. I was a little bit lost on what to do about that. Listened to the episode, got that nailed down. And so we cruised along on Dash until, beginning of May. And, we were 70, 75% in range, more highs than lows, nothing super high. And, once in a while we'd get a glimpse of an 85 or a 90 or a 95% in range. And those were, days where I'd screenshot my phone and pat myself on the back. But nights, waking up 2 or 3 times a night was pretty common. We were micromanaging it.
Right.
I was literally a full-time pancreas.
Yeah. So when you hear about Omnipod 5, is that something you thought immediately about, or did you take time to warm up to the? Oh, you did. Okay.
No, I was thinking about Loop actually pretty early on, and then found out that the Omnipod 5 was close to approval, although there was this caveat that people had been saying that for a long time, and I thought that was, it was worth waiting a little bit to see if that came down, because honestly, it just seemed a lot less intimidating to me. I mean, remember too, we hadn't been doing this that long. So it felt less intimidating. It felt a little more user friendly. And I'm a help desk person. Like something goes wrong on like my work computer or my work email. Like I like that I have someone to call and talk about that with. And on that basis alone, almost Loop didn't seem like the right fit at this time. So
I got you. Yeah. When your email won't work, you don't sit around trying to figure out how to fix it. You're like, I'm just going to call this guy at the number.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's me. I'm a help desk person.
Let her tell me. I'm not doing this. So I understand. I absolutely do. And so you get Omnipod 5 when?
May 7th.
Oh, look at you. You know the day.
It came on Mother's Day.
Oh, that's an easy way to remember.
Correct.
Okay. So hold on. June, July, August, September, October. Oh, wow. You've had it 6 months.
6 months.
Okay. Great. Tell me all about it.
Okay. Well, the important caveat here is that we got it. I mean, we were one of the first people, at least as best I can tell, on like Facebook who weren't in the trial to get it. Our endo hadn't been trained on it. They were like, we're not going to be any help to you. You got to figure. We'll write it. At the time, it was off label because my son wasn't 6 yet. We'll write the script, but like you're completely on your own. You hadn't done any pro tip series on this yet, so we were really like open the box, read the manual, try to figure it out. And with the benefit of hindsight, I might have done our setup very differently and probably saved ourselves a lot of time and heartache. But we, opened the box and put in our settings and had a lot of struggles at the beginning.
Okay. So your settings were
we put our settings in from Dash. I mean, which were good settings for Dash, but I hadn't appreciated. I was too impulsive about the whole thing. I hadn't appreciated how the algorithm was going to work. I had been so jumpy about getting it and wanting to try it right away that I hadn't thought through or reached out to resources about strategies for setting it up. I literally just dumped my settings in and hit go. And I was like, okay, great. We're all going to sleep now.
It's over. Everyone,
right.
It's over. It's over.
We're done with diabetes.
Yeah.
I told my job I was going to come back full time. I was like, this is next week, maybe the week after, we'll be good.
Yeah. I'm probably going to start running like marathons and I am gonna go on a diet. Probably gonna get shredded. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I'm gonna get abs.
I'm gonna have all this time on my hands.
Yeah.
What on earth am I gonna do with
Do
myself?
you think I should knit while I'm running? This is gonna be wonderful. So instead, is what? Let me guess, and if I'm wrong, of course,
Yep.
stop me. Is what you learned over time that your settings from a manual pump were a starting point, but that you were adding insulin so frequently in other places that really your settings were very weak?
That's completely true.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that we struggled with was there was no real direction on let the algorithm work, let it learn, don't touch it, let it do its thing, right? And then he'd be at like 250 and climbing, and I'd be sitting in the corner having an anxiety attack and being like, I can't let it learn on its own. I must give him insulin. And and then being told, well, you're going to screw up the algorithm when you do that. And you've done that. And so now you've like set yourself back.
Isn't it funny? Because it's the beginning, and it's a different algorithm. There are people who will tell you, don't touch it. Don't do anything. Don't just let it figure it out. And then there are people who will say, no, if your blood sugar's high, bolus and
Right.
teach it that you need more insulin, which I believe is the line right from the nurse practitioner that was on my thing, right? She's like, if you're high, bolus, it'll figure it out when it sees more insulin. But you don't know either of those things to be true or not
Correct.
true. So you're just sort of sitting there going,
right. I'll go a few days where I'll let it do its thing and he'll be high. And then I'll have a panic attack and I'll be like, I can't do it anymore. And I'll give him tons of insulin. And then it didn't seem to work. And so, the first month was really, really tough. I mean, it was our own fault in that we weren't sufficiently educated and didn't have the right expectations and didn't know how to manage it. But once we went back to kind of basic principles of insulin and how things work, we started to get better and figure it out.
Right. Hey, listen, if it makes you feel any better, as soon as last night, Arden had she knows what to do. Like the meals at college are terrible, right? So she has to basically make a secondary bolus for her meals that come out of the cafeteria. She has to. It doesn't matter how big she tells it. Like if she says, hey, this is 70 carbs, this meal, and she needs a secondary bolus later. If she were to tell the same meal it's 90 carbs, it still wouldn't matter. It's how crappy the food is. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so you have to understand how these algorithms, all of them, end up working. And so for Arden, who's looping, last night, she has this 180 blood sugar like 2 hours after a meal. And I'm like, Arden, you didn't make the secondary bolus. She's like, well, I'm doing my homework. I forgot. I was like, well, that's fine, but put in insulin, right? And so I can see on Night Scout what she did, and she just makes a bolus. And I text her right back. I'm like, hey, that's not going to work. That's not going. What are you doing? Like, so she's so busy with her homework. She like throws in like a unit and a half of insulin. As soon as she does that, the algorithm's like, a unit and a half, we don't need this, turns off her basal. And that's probably what was happening to you when you were putting in extra insulin. Like you told the algorithm, these settings are going to work. And then you're like, no, here's a whole bunch of extra insulin. And it's thinking, no, I'm going to get this blood sugar back down based on our settings, except it never was going to because your settings were that far off, I guess, for the algorithm. How long did it take for it to learn? Or did you bite the bullet and reset the controller and start over?
So we didn't do a reset. We did go all in on the teaching it. If he's high, I'm bolusing. If he's heading high, I'm bolusing. We made all of our carb ratios more aggressive. We started treating lows much less aggressively and really like microdosing it because we then understood that the background, it's not basal, the microboluses had been shut off for a while. And so what we used to dose on the dash to treat a low was going to spike him super high if we did it this way because there's no insulin circulating around in his system.
Right.
And we started just thinking about it differently, like not to use the sports analogy, but I've used this when other people who are just starting on the 5 have kind of reached out to me. It's it's a great teammate. It's like a star shortstop. It's going to do a really, really great job, but you still have to be in the game and you still have to play the game, and it still requires, work and care, and it can only it can't do you have to recognize what its limitations are and kind of jump in.
Right. I feel great about what you just said about learning how to treat low blood sugars when you're on an algorithm, because I'm starting to see a lot of people figuring that out online, which is really good. But the idea of, if you're treating a low at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but this algorithm has been thinking for the last 90 minutes, you're going to get low at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's been taking your basal away and insulin away in one way or in one fashion or another, probably for 90 minutes. And
Right.
so, yeah, you're still drifting low because whatever happened before ended up being too heavy, but there's nothing there to resist when you put carbs in that scenario. And so all of a sudden 15 carbs or a juice box or something like that is going to turn you into 250, instead of before when your basal had been running the entire time in the background and you were low. It's odd that low blood sugar on a manual pump versus that low blood sugar on an algorithm, the number's the same, but everything that happened prior to it's different.
And the effect that anything's going to have on it is totally different.
Right, because there's either more or less new insulin from basal over the last 90 minutes, depending on which system you're in. Well, you guys
and look,
figured that out quick.
we rely on, the PDM for the Omnipod 5. There's a way to kind of see how it's been microbolusing. And we try to look at that before we make any low treatment decision or any bolus, to stop a high or to stop a climb.
Yeah.
Because you have to factor in what the pump is doing and how long it's been doing it for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I'm supposed to say that it's a controller, not a PDM anymore.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I don't actually care. I don't want to get a text like, a week after this comes out and somebody says, hey, at 34 minutes in your conversation with Carrie about Omnipod 5, she calls it a PDM. And would you mind? So I'm getting around that right now.
Well, my son calls it the doser. So, whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I know a lot of public relations people who'll be thrilled to know that. Give me the pricker and the doser and let's get rolling here. Yeah.
That's 6-year-old terminology for
That's
it.
about right for me. Okay. So how long did it... So is hindsight telling you that you didn't put settings in a way that was going to give you success up front?
Yes.
Okay. So have you learned over time that what ended up being in those Omnipod 5 pro tip episodes is true? Like for some reason, when that algorithm begins, the settings need to be somewhere near 50-50. Basal bolus, and then it adjusts off that. It won't even keep doing that 5 minutes later. It just for some reason needs to know that going in.
Yeah, and look, I mean, one of the things that we've struggled with and we occasionally, talk about with some frequency is like, should we do the hard reset, right? Like now we're 6 months in, we have all this knowledge that we didn't have at the time, but I don't know. It feels so risky. It feels like I've spent 6 months teaching this thing what to do, and it's pretty darn good.
This is why women stay with men.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big leap to take. So I'm not there yet, though. You could potentially get me there if you thought that was the right thing to do.
No, listen. What I know is, not going to be helpful to you probably. But so, to kind of go over that a little bit, it's in the Omnipod 5 Pro Tip series, which I did in conjunction with Omnipod and a healthcare professional. And they're actually, I have to say so, they're good episodes. Like they really will help you. But the algorithm wants 50-50. And I have to say, if I had that conversation prior to starting Arden on Omnipod 5, when we started her, I would have probably just taken her total daily insulin and chopped it in half. I think that's what I would have ended up doing. I think I would have just said, like, I don't know, she gets this much insulin every day. I'll take half of that number and divide it by 24, and that's going to be our basal rate.
Yeah.
Because,
I mean, that's what we would like if we were starting this now with all that, with the benefit of those episodes and that knowledge, that's what we would have done.
yeah.
But, we didn't have it, and we're not anywhere near 50-50.
Yeah,
I'm not,
not to say that your son needs 50-50. It's to say you really have to listen to it to hear it explained, but that's what for some reason, that's what the algorithm needs as it begins to learn.
right.
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 So, and I don't know. I don't know why it doesn't just, I don't know. It doesn't, listen, I don't know. I didn't program the thing, so I don't understand how it works.
It just
right?
is what it is.
It
But
just, yeah.
in retrospect, given what we experienced in the first few weeks, it's easy to see why that it makes clear that what you said in the episode about that is right.
Okay.
Like, we were not at 50-50. Our settings weren't 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a mistake.
Okay. And so what you got out of that were spikes at meals?
Spikes at meals, huge spikes with low treatments until we figured out that we were completely doing that wrong. But pretty stable night times almost from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that without the stable night times, we would have stayed with it at that time. I think we would have probably stopped it and then come back to it once like there was more kind of knowledge of how to set it up and how to get started with it successfully out there. But I was jumpy and I wanted it now. And, there's a price to pay for that.
And you were enticed by the sleeping, huh?
Yeah, the sleep is good. I mean, really can't. And we haven't been at it that long. We were only sleep deprived for, from like October to May.
Mm-hmm.
Can't imagine people that have not slept in years, how wonderful something like this would be. But like, barring a technology failure, a compression low that screws things up, a sensor error, a pump site absorption issue, right? Something like on the technology,
Mm-hmm.
we all basically sleep through the night.
Yeah, no, that's pretty great.
It's really good.
Yeah. Arden had the same situation with the Omnipod 5, like almost immediately. Like her nights were really terrific. Actually, I've learned a lot about overnight since Arden went to college because she's so far away, excuse me, and, there's no way to help her and all that stuff. We did kind of dial back her overnight numbers a little bit. Like, I'm okay if she's overnight at 95, 100, 105, 110, like because she's 13 hours away from us. And, my best bet to save her life, if something happens, is a person who lives with her who may or may not be drunk. You know what I mean? So it's like, excuse me, when that becomes your reality, you're sort of like, all right, well, let me be a little more careful. But after the first couple days and getting things figured out, like, I mean, I should probably knock on something, but Arden hasn't had a low overnight, like the entire time she's been away at school.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So, okay, so that kept you in the game a little longer. You're like, all right,
kept me in the game.
Yeah, I'll figure out the rest if I get to sleep.
Right.
So what did you actually figure something out?
No, I changed our ratios so that he was getting bigger boluses at meal times, in an effort to raise the total daily insulin and compensate for what I viewed as like a less aggressive than I'd like microbolus.
Can I stop you for a second and ask a question?
Please.
So Omnipod says that when you change that settings in the pump, when you put settings in the Omnipod 5, those settings, as soon as the algorithm begins to work, those settings are only for manual operation.
And that is completely correct.
Okay. So you're saying when you say you change ratios, you mean you kind of started counting carbs differently.
I started counting carbs differently so that he was getting more insulin per day than he was getting with our old ratios. Right.
So you if I may, you said, hey, our carb ratio is 1 to whatever you thought it was.
Right.
You see that not working. You can't just go tell the pump, hey, magic algorithm, instead of it being 1 to 20 carbs, I want you to make it 1 to 15 carbs, because that doesn't change the algorithm's opinion.
Correct.
And so you started counting up a meal and going, I think this is definitely 40 carbs, but I'm going to tell the pump it's 50.
Right.
Okay.
I'm going to give him more. I'm going to tell the pump that he needs more insulin on a daily basis so that when the pump is aiming for its 50-50, it's thinking about the total bottom line number differently.
But then after it figures that out, does it mess you up when you're counting carbs? Like, do you always have to overestimate the carbs after
No,
that?
then you got to back it off.
Okay.
So the other thing that I don't want to say like figure it out, but we started changing our pre-bolus time. We were militant about a 15-minute pre-bolus. Scott said it's a 15-minute pre-bolus. The pro tip episode says it's a 15-minute pre-bolus. It must always be a 15-minute pre-bolus. And what we found was that depending on how active the algorithm had been in the background leading up to the meal, a 15-minute pre-bolus wasn't always going to lead to a successful outcome. And that, whereas prior, on the DASH, let's say I dose for a meal 15 minutes before, he's 115 and flat, and I want him to be, 90 heading down when he's going to eat whatever he's about to eat. So I pre-bolus for what I know will get him there. If you take that same strategy on the Omnipod 5, what we were finding, and Danny is pretty insulin sensitive, so there's a caveat there, but what we were finding is that the algorithm would see him heading down and would reduce or cut off the basal or the microboluses. And if we could have him eating when he was 100 and flat or 110 and flat, there would still be insulin being given to him in the background. And that was leading to much more successful outcomes post-meal time. So we started changing the pre-bolus time from 15 minutes. I'm really sorry. I know it's supposed to be 15 minutes.
It's not supposed to be 15 minutes. It's whatever works.
But we have now sort of adjusted it based on how much insulin we think he has circulating in his system based on the auto history. And it's been a lot more successful.
And you've been making the pre-bolus longer or shorter?
Shorter. I mean, if he's high, we'll make it longer. Or if he's heading up, we'll make it longer because we want to give the insulin a chance to work. But if he's kind of where I want him to be after the meal, depending on if he hasn't gotten insulin in a while in the background, we'll keep it around 15 minutes. But if the pump has been active, we'll make it shorter so that he doesn't go low pre or during mealtime.
Right. Wow. You're good at talking about this. Do you know?
I've listened to you a lot, and I'm just trying to do a good job.
No, I mean, you're good at explaining it. It's a simple idea, and it gets lost on people when they make the switch from pumping to algorithms, that there's nothing in your pump when you're using a regular pump that says, hey, you're getting low, so I'll turn off your basal insulin. And because of that, all of your experiences are predicated on a constant delivery of basal. And now your experiences aren't always predicated on that. And it's a leap for some people. And I don't know if it's just because they don't think of it that way, or if they have just been, if they really didn't know what they were doing before, they just learned what to expect and how to handle it. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know, it's very heartwarming to hear you thinking through all this and figuring it out. Well, today, now 6 months later, how's it going? I mean, do you spike at meals anymore? Did you figure that all out? Does it happen sometimes? You know how to fix it? What happened?
I mean, look, he's 6. So there are days where it's just total brilliance. Like Halloween just happened. That's a good example. He was 99% in range, 80 to 150 as the range set the entire day. And given what went on that day, like I pricked his finger when he was fine because I didn't believe that the Dexcom was working because it was that good. So there are stretches and days of like total brilliance. And then, there are days when, for whatever reason, we're less successful. I mean, the variables are still there. It's not eliminating the variables. It's not eliminating a super absorbent pump site where he's going to be low more. It's not eliminating the level of activity. It's not eliminating growth hormones. Like, one of the things that we didn't know at the beginning, but we've learned, is that the algorithm can't learn time of day. The algorithm is never going to learn that your kid goes to sleep and starts climbing at 10 o'clock at night. It's never going to learn that. It can't. So that's where, like, you need to be the team player, and you need to come in, and that that's going to happen. You have knowledge that the algorithm doesn't, that every night at 10 o'clock, our kid rises because of growth hormones. And we need to bolus that. We need to bolus it early, and we need to do it aggressively. So, in terms of outcomes, his A1C is great. His time in range average over 90 days is 89%.
Wow.
And there's some bad days built into that, and then there's some real brilliant days built into that. And I'm not sure how to make it better. I have noticed that, like, one of our struggles now is figuring out how to string together more of the brilliant days across multiple pump changes. I think it's the learning nature of the algorithm. I don't know, and I don't think Insulet has shared sort of the period of time that the pump considers in making adjustments to its own calculations, but you do have to recognize that that's like an evolving thing, and I'd like to be able to stretch together more brilliant days in a row without a bad day in between, but I'm not sure how realistic that is.
When all this technology comes out, doesn't matter what company it comes from, I always try to remember how amazing it was to get a Dexcom the first time. And now, in hindsight, I look back at it and I think, well, that thing was not as accurate as it could have been. It was difficult to put on. They used to have a manual inserter, the Dexcom. Did you know that? You'd put the sensor bed on, and there was like a tube that came off of it with a plunger at the end, and you would actually have to push down on the plunger to get it to go in. And I look back on all that. And I think, well, with hindsight, that looks like a train wreck. But in the moment, it was the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. So good. Yeah, it was absolutely the best thing I had ever seen in my life. And so I try to apply that idea to Omnipod 5 or Loop or anything that people, I keep thinking, imagine what it's going to look like a year from now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now. This is going to be amazing, and you're not describing something that's a train wreck. You're describing... No. Yeah, and that's what I want to understand. Compared to you doing it manually. So for a moment, take out all of your effort and your time and you're not sleeping, right? Because we understand that you got saved all that stuff. Right. Just management, just health-wise. Are you where you were before, worse off or better off?
Definitely better. Unquestionably better. Both on a numbers basis and also on my mental health in terms of the variables that I'm dealing with. I mean, I remember I listened to your pro tip episode on basal testing. I'm sitting there looking at my newly diagnosed 6-year-old, and I was like, no effing way, right? It just felt so hard. And then the idea that you could nail it and then have to change it. And the beauty of the 5 is that it kind of takes, if you're just camping out in automated mode, which is what we do, it kind of takes that away. It eliminates the variable of whatever you think the basal rate is or should be. And that's really freeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I understand. Excellent. Well, that's great news. You're a proponent then. If somebody came to you and said, I'm thinking of getting this, you'd say, do it?
Absolutely do it. Understand how it will work, right? Understand that it's the teammate. It's not going to carry the team. You have to be there. You have to be engaged. I think the auto history is really important, and factoring that into how you manage your child is really important. And I think that there's um that on the low treatment side, I mean, we made this chart for like his summer camp. He goes to like a day camp
Mhm.
locally, and they have a nurse team that manages it, and they've been managing kids with diabetes for a long time. And we roll in, and they've never heard of the five before, and they're like, okay, so if he goes low, we give him a juice box, right? And I was like, well, no, here's my Excel spreadsheet of different scenarios where you might treat with 2 carbs or 6 carbs or 8 carbs. And I think if you can figure that out and what works for your kid and figure out the pre-bolus time, are you going to have a flat graph at, flat at 110 or 100 every single day? I don't think that's a realistic expectation, or
Mhm.
at least I haven't figured out yet how to make that happen. But look, I mean, you do high 80% over a long period of time with sleep. Almost doesn't matter what you have to do during the day.
Right.
So
And your son's not eating like a pescatarian diet or some specific
if
way.
I
Like,
told you what my son ate, it would make your skin crawl. He has Eggo waffles and Pop-Tarts and pizza and cake. And I mean, you know, there's lots of different schools of thought for us and for our family at this moment in time. Keeping his normal as it was really important, I think, for
okay.
his mental health and his acceptance of this.
Yeah.
So that's the choice we made, and may make a different choice down the road. He may make a different choice, but um, no, I mean, like I, I can dose toaster strudels and not have it spike now.
Wow, look at you. I have two things I want to say here. One, I'm going to say kind of sounds joking, but I'm being serious. Omnipod.com/juicebox. If anybody listening is thinking about getting an Omnipod DASH or an Omnipod 5, thanks very much. The second thing is I'm I'm really stunned at how you were able to take my, like, not the Omnipod 5 Pro Tip series, but the other Pro Tip series, the bigger one. And you took the information out of it and you did with it what I intended, which is you learned about it and then you molded it into your life and you extracted from it and built onto it. I know that people can hear them and think these must be the rules, but they're just a jumping in point. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have
Yep.
to experience the rest of it then, and you have to apply it and watch it work and watch it fail and go, okay, that's really, I don't know. I'm just very, I don't even know what the word is. Like, you're making me feel very good about something that I did.
You should. I mean, we wouldn't be even close to where we are now without that. And the fact that it can be applied to it, the fact that it can be applied to a new technology that didn't even exist when you were, or at least didn't exist in your world when you were making a
Right.
lot of these episodes. Insulin still works the same way, and it works the same way whether you're on loop or on the five or anything else. And um, that.
That's great. It really is. It's amazing. I'm so happy for you guys, first of all. But I don't know, like, you say something out loud years ago, like this whole thing, like, I used to say all the time, like, managing insulin is about timing and amount. You have to use the right amount of insulin at the right time. And it holds true if you're putting it in with a syringe, if you're putting it in with a pump, if you're putting it in with an algorithm, it all still is the same. There are influences on your blood sugar, and that are carbohydrates or body function or whatever that are trying to push your blood sugar up. There are influences on your blood sugar that are insulin that are trying to push them down. And you just have to kind of keep those influences in a state of flux where they really, neither of them can kind of beat the other one. And then that's what stability is.
Right.
And if you can wrap your head around that, then you're on your way. But I don't know. I mean, those Pro Tip series, it's 2022 in November. I think they came out in 2019 or 2020, maybe. So they're already almost 3 years old, and that they applied to another technologies. I don't know. I'm just very happy today to hear this from you. It's interesting. I feel like I'm hearing my voice filtered through another person's life and then spit back at me, if that makes sense while you're talking.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think in addition to the pro tips, the one thing that I would say is, there are little nuggets in a lot of the other episodes that, can be life-changing. I mean, I've said to other people that changing our Dexcom lines changed my life.
Yeah.
And rethinking about the way that you set your own expectations is also, as the caregiver, our mental health matters less, but matters too. And, the way the human brain works, I mean, you said at the beginning, it's consistent. So,
yeah. Wow. And so do you feel like, take all the diabetes stuff away, do you feel better now, like, than you did a year ago? Are you in a different place?
I mean, then at diagnosis,
well,
yes. I mean, I recognize that, like, we're early in this marathon, that a lot of people have been plugging away at it a lot longer than us, and we sort of have this luxury of having the best technology available now, and that's an incredible gift that I feel like I've given my kid. Yeah, I mean, look, are there days where I want to still sit in the corner and cry? Of course, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Like, both, on a macro level because he has type 1 diabetes, and also on the micro level because maybe he's having a day where what I think is going to happen doesn't really happen. But I think I'm getting better at it. And I think you do, at the beginning, everyone said it gets easier. And I was like, that's BS, right? That's like when someone you love dies and they're like, oh, time will heal it. It's like, no, it doesn't heal it. I still miss the person.
Right.
It doesn't get better. You just get better at it.
Yeah, it's 100% right. Now, I mean, I don't know if you're quoting me or if that's your experience, but yeah, it's just right. Diabetes is always hard. But there'll be a time when you have so many tools and so much experience that it's I don't know. It's sort of like when you watch a sporting event, or, and you think, God, how does that person do that? Yeah, I could never do that. But,
right.
Maybe you couldn't throw a football 70 yards in the air, right? But you could find a way to get better at throwing a football, and you might get, and then that would make the task easier. And this is what happens to all levels with people.
Right. And I'm hoping that it continues to get easier, because I still feel like it's my full-time job, and I'd like to get to a place where maybe I don't feel that way. But I think it's, like, important to know that it still sucks. It's always going to suck. It's always going to be a lot of work. It's never going to be, like, under control. But you do things get easier, little things. We wouldn't let him have toaster strudels at the beginning because I couldn't figure out how to dose for them. And then eventually I figured out how to dose for them. And now he's happier because he can eat his crappy breakfast in the morning. And little things like those things get easier. And I'm excited to see how much easier they can get as we kind of go through this. So.
Yeah. Oh, the other, a couple weeks ago, Arden, I saw something happen with her blood sugar. Like, it started to go up, but then it stopped, and it got, like, whatever. I wasn't with her, but something hit her hard, but her bolus hit hard back, and then she leveled out, and she was good. And it didn't take long. Like, it wasn't a big spike or anything like that. And I asked her later in the day, I was like, hey, what'd you eat, last evening at like 8:00 or something like that? She goes, oh, I got hungry, and the cafe was closed already. I couldn't get over there in time. And I was like, okay. And she goes, so I just had a bowl of cereal. And I was like, oh, wow. I didn't ask her what kind. I don't know what she ate. But all I know is that my 18-year-old daughter bolused a bowl of cereal, didn't go over 140, and didn't get low afterwards. And
that's
I was
amazing.
like, that's amazing. Because I can remember standing in my kitchen going, hey, what do you want for breakfast? And then thinking in my head, don't say cereal. Don't say cereal. Don't say that. And then there's that, of course, there's an episode where I talk about where she got old enough, when she was younger, and she was starting to understand her appointments. You know what I mean? We're in with the endo, and we got outside in the driveway, and she said, what could I do to make my A1C lower? And I said, well, for the moment, if you could just stop eating cereal, that would be huge. It's like, right. Because I haven't figured out how to do that yet. This is a long, long time ago, And she's like, okay. And she just stopped. That was it. And then I figured it out better. I figured out insulin in general. And then I started applying it to higher glycemic stuff and figuring out how to do that. And I mean, I wouldn't say that Arden probably has 5 bowls of cereal a year, but at least we know how to handle it now when it happens. So it's very cool. Carrie, is there anything we haven't said that you want to? Anything we've skipped or missed or that I haven't asked?
I don't think so.
We did it that easily? This was very good. I almost don't want to make this a longer episode because it's so succinct and you were so clear about it.
Short but sweet.
Yeah, exactly. You can come back later because you seem cool. I think we would like each other.
I happen to be a Phillies fan as well, so I think we could get along very well.
Are you in the area?
I'm not, but I went to college in Pennsylvania.
Oh, no kidding.
So I was surrounded by it for a long time, and didn't have a strong opinion of my own at the time about baseball teams. So was happy to kind of sign on with what the group was doing.
It would be hard to be here and not be a Phillies fan, that's for sure. So why don't we just, because it has to go somewhere in the episodes, I will just tell you that the World Series is happening right now. As we record this, the Phillies are down 3-2 in the World Series. They're heading back to Houston for Game 6. And my son and I actually went to the World Series last night. We went and watched the Phillies lose 3-2. But it was one of those things that, as soon as they got in, I said to him, I was like, if we can find a way to go, we should go, And he's like, yeah, okay. Wasn't going to get him to argue about that. I've never been to a World Series. I think he and I went to one National League Championship game, maybe in 2011, if I'm remembering correctly. So the oddity is we don't go to a lot of baseball games, like in person, like professional baseball games, because my son is usually playing baseball when baseball is being played. So you don't get that opportunity. And anyway, it very quickly became obvious that we did not win the lottery from the Phillies for tickets, which are at ticket price, face value. And you start looking into the secondary market, and the tickets are they're ridiculous. Like, very cheap very, very cheap seats are $800, like $1,000. And you don't even get a seat. You get to stand in a sea of drunk people and watch the game, And I went online and I thought, I wonder if I know anybody, like through the podcast or something, that might know somebody. So I said, would anybody be able to get tickets for this game that, if they were interested in selling, I'd want to know about them. And the one thing you don't know is that a person contacted me privately and said, I have a friend whose father is a part owner in the Astros, and I might be able to get tickets. And we tried that. That didn't work out because we asked so late. And other people would come online and say, like, oh, you should try here. And actually one person gave me an idea of an app to use that ended up being less expensive. But what I didn't expect is that someone came on to the Facebook group and they're like, hey, everybody, let's give Scott money to go to the World Series. And I'm like, now that gets weird, Carrie, because I have a job. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not looking for people to, like, I don't know, crowdfund me going to a baseball game with my son. And she had made this, it was Susie. She had made this, like, overture online. And I have to admit, I ignored her. Because I didn't want to, like, because no matter what I do, she's going to do it. Like, if I go, no, don't be silly, please don't do that. She's going to say, no, you help me or whatever, and I'm going to do this. So I just kind of ignored her. I felt bad. And then she emailed my moderator and said to Isabel, I want to put up a post to try to raise money for Scott to go to the World Series. And now it's weird because you know what I mean, Carrie? Like, it's lovely, and that would be amazing if somebody did that for you, but I don't need that, and there's part of me that doesn't want it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want somebody to do that. So I told Isabel, you're going to get a note, ignore it. And she's like, okay. I'm like, just don't respond. She goes, I feel bad. I'm like, just don't, because it's going to turn into people giving me money to go to a baseball game, and I'm uncomfortable with that. But then Susie just kept going and going online. And finally she put up a post and said, hey, like, let's go to the World Series. You know what I mean? Like, it's the weirdest, like, Make-A-Wish thing ever. I don't have any reason to be making a wish. And the next thing I know, there's like $1,300 in a pile. And I said to my son, I was like, well, I now people gave me this money. I was like, I'd feel weird now not using it for what they wanted me to use it for. So we got up yesterday morning.
That's awesome.
Yeah, found seats online, and we had a great time. Like, it was
awesome.
Really, it was amazing. It's the most intense sporting event I've ever been at.
I brought my I brought my 6-year-old to his first baseball, my type 1 to his first baseball game. I took him to a Mets game over the summer, and I thought to myself, like, okay, this is going to be hard. This is going to be hard to dose. He's going to want everything. And it actually,
Did okay?
It went really well. It was like one of those Halloween miracles. Like the algorithm handled where I got it wrong, and I just kept giving him insulin when I saw him starting to creep up, and it was actually like really empowering because you spend all this time counting the when you're first diagnosed, counting the carbs and thinking about pre-bolus time and all the rest. And this was a night where we just sort of, all right, you want the chicken fingers and the fries? You want to chase it with the ice cream cup that comes in the helmet? Like, and it is what it is.
We'll
and
figure it out. Yeah. You probably felt the way I felt the first time in a movie theater that Arden's like, I'm going to get a slushie and cookie dough bites. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. But, so,
you put your game face on.
Yeah, there were no algorithms then. Like, I remember us being in the lobby, and I was like, if you're going to do that, we're going to bolus right now. And my theory was bunch of insulin, and then we'll feed the insulin backwards. Like, so that's basically what we did. Like, we got her falling, and then you start hitting this icy, and that thing just boom, boom, that keeps trying to push you up. And I just kept using the icy as a parachute for the free fall from the insulin. And that over the years, I got better at it. But that first time, that's what I did. I was like, I'm just going to pour this insulin over your head. And then you start drinking the Coca-Cola Slurpee that you just got. So anyway, Carrie, I really appreciate you doing this. I have to jump off because, believe it or not, I'm recording another episode in a half an hour. So I'm still...
Thanks so much for your time and for everything you've done for us. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. Did a lot for me today too. Like, hearing you talk about stuff through the lens of the podcast was uplifting to me. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
A huge thanks to Carrie for coming on the show and sharing her story with us. And I want to thank BetterHelp and remind you to go to betterhelp.com/juicebox to save 10% off your first month of therapy. So many of us spend so much time helping others. Once in a while, you should help yourself. betterhelp.com/juicebox. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. Don't forget to check out the private Facebook group. It's completely free, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. And if you're looking for all those episodes about Omnipod 5, there's a list right in the private Facebook group in the feature tab with all of them right there. I think you can also find them at juiceboxpodcast.com or go into your podcast app and search Omnipod 5 Pro Tip. They'll pop right up. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.